The blue light from the holographic display made Admiral Sprackstar's scaly skin look even more frightening as he stared at the small planet floating in space. Earth looked so peaceful from here, just a blue ball with white clouds swirling around. He had seen hundreds of worlds like this one. "Look at this pathetic little world," Commander Thalax said with disgust. His thick tentacles moved back and forth as he spoke. "My scanners showed they barely know how to split atoms. We could conquer them in less than a day." Admiral Vexstar's 4 eyes blinked one after another, which was how his people showed they were amused. "Send them the usual message, Commander.
Oh.
Let these primitive creatures know who their new masters will be." Far below on Earth's surface, Dr. Kim Ji-woo stood in a room filled with glowing screens and blinking lights. The Seoul Command Center was hidden deep underground, and only a few hundred people in the world knew it existed. Her fingers moved quickly across the light-based controls as data streamed across dozens of monitors around her. "Dr. Park," she called out to a man working at another station. "Can you tell what kind of communication system they're using?" Park Min-ho looked up from his console, his face serious. "They're using quantum particles, but it's pretty basic technology. They're sending the same message on 17 different channels at once. It's meant to scare us." The alien message came through Earth's communication systems with a crackling sound. Primitive beings of the third planet. "You will bow down to the Hegemony Confederation. Fight us, and we will wipe out your entire species. You have 24 hours to surrender." Gi-woo looked around at her team. Lee Hoon-woo, the youngest scientist in the group, was trying hard not to smile. "Dr. Kim, should we start the collective protocol?" "Yes," Ji-woo said quietly. "Send our reply." All around the world, other secret facilities came to life. In the frozen wasteland of Siberia, Dr. Choi Minji began turning on machines that could bend space and time. In the thick jungle of the Amazon, engineer Han Seojin started up systems that had been waiting for this moment for decades. Earth's response was simple, and sent on frequencies that should have been impossible for humans to use. Unknown ships. "You have made a terrible mistake. Leave now." Ip and his flagship, Admiral Vexstar's eyes blinked again in amusement. A mistake? These little mammals think they can threaten the mighty hegemony? But the Admiral didn't know something important. Far away, 47 light-years from Earth, human watchers had spotted his fleet long before it reached their solar system. Humans had been preparing for this day for a very long time. Dr. Song Moran sat in her control room on Luna Base looking at her screens with cold satisfaction. She watched as strange, dark ships began appearing from nowhere around the alien fleet. These ships were so black they seemed to swallow light itself, and they moved through space like living shadows. "The trap is ready," she whispered into her communication device. "They came here thinking we were helpless prey. They're about to learn that we are the hunters." Hegemony had made this same mistake many times before. They would arrive at a world, demand surrender, and then take over when the frightened inhabitants gave up. It had worked on thousands of planets across the galaxy. Weak species would see their powerful ships and advanced weapons and simply submit. But Earth was different. Humans had spent decades preparing for this exact situation. While other species had developed faster ships or better weapons, humans had focused on something else entirely. They had learned how to break their enemies' minds. Commander Tholax looked at his tactical display and frowned. "Admiral, I'm detecting some unusual readings around our fleet." "What kind of readings?" Vexstar asked, though he wasn't really worried yet. "I'm not sure, sir. It's almost like there are ships out there, but they're not showing up properly on our sensors." Admiral Vexstar moved to look at the display himself. What he saw made his blood run cold. Dark shapes were moving around his fleet like sharks, circling their prey. These weren't normal ships. They seemed to exist partially outside of regular space. "How is this possible?" he whispered. "No primitive species should have this kind of technology." Back on Earth, Ji-woo smiled as reports came in from around the globe. Every secret facility was now online and ready. Humanity's greatest weapons weren't bombs or lasers. They were things far more terrifying. They'd spent centuries learning. How to create fear itself. L. Dr. Park, she said calmly. Begin phase 1 of the demonstration. The hegemony fleet suddenly found themselves surrounded by ships that moved like nightmares through space. These vessels didn't just travel from one place to another. They seemed to slide through dimensions that shouldn't exist. Admiral Vextar realized with growing horror that his fleet had sailed straight into a trap. The primitive species they had come to conquer had been waiting for them all along. And now, as dark ships closed in around them like a tightening noose, he began to understand that humanity was something the galaxy had never seen before. They weren't just another species to be conquered. They were predators who had learned to hunt with fear itself. The alien landing ships fell from the sky like silver teardrops, their protective energy fields glowing as they cut through Earth's atmosphere. From his command ship high above, Admiral Vextar watched his soldiers prepare to take control of what he thought was a helpless planet. Landing Zone Alpha is secure, reported Captain Ziekmer through the communication system. No fighting anywhere. It looks like these humans ran away from their cities. Deep beneath the city of Seoul, Parkman-ho stared at a control panel that looked almost too simple. Just 3 switches and 1 red button. His hands shook slightly as he waited for the order. Dr. Kim, I can see exactly where they landed. Dr. Kim Ji-woo looked around at her team. Lee Hyun-woo's face had turned white because he knew what was about to happen. The young scientist understood better than anyone how terrible their weapons really were. Member Ji-woo said in a soft voice, "We warned them to leave. They chose to stay." The first sign that something was wrong came from Landing Team Beta. They had secured an empty street in what used to be downtown Tokyo just minutes before. Now their leader's voice crackled through the radio with confusion and growing fear. "Admiral. Sir, something strange is happening here. This street, it's getting longer. I can't see the end of it anymore, and the buildings are bending toward us." Admiral Vextar frowned at his display screen. "What do you mean bending? Buildings don't bend." "Sir, I know how this sounds, but the street we're on keeps stretching. We've been walking for 10 minutes, but we haven't moved from where we started. And the buildings. They're leaning over us like they're trying to fall down, but they never do." In the Seoul Command Center, Dr. Choi Minji watched her instruments with cold satisfaction. "Reality distortion field is working perfectly," she reported. "The subjects are experiencing localized space-time manipulation." Captain Ziekmer's voice came through the radio again, but this time he sounded scared. "Admiral, our positioning equipment is going crazy. It says we're in 17 different places at the same time. It's impossible." "Stay calm, Captain," Admiral Vextar ordered, though he was starting to feel worried himself. These primitives can't possibly have technology that advanced, but the reports kept getting worse. Landing Team Gamma reported that the empty office building they had entered now had infinite floors. Every time they climbed a staircase, it led to another identical floor with the same empty rooms and flickering lights. Landing Team Delta found themselves in a subway tunnel that had no beginning and no end. They could walk in either direction for hours, but they always ended up back where they started. Worse, they could hear something moving in the darkness behind them, but whenever they turned to look, nothing was there. Han Saiyajin, monitoring from Han Saiyajin. His station in the Amazon facility watched the alien soldiers' vital signs on his screens. Their heart rates were climbing dangerously high, and their brain activity showed patterns of extreme panic. "Dr. Kim," he reported, "the psychological pressure is building faster than we expected. These aliens are more susceptible to spatial distortion fear than our models predicted." Then the screaming started. It began with Landing Team Beta Captain. Ziekmer's professional military voice dissolved into pure terror as he shouted into his radio, "The shadows are moving. The shadows have eyes. Admiral, please, you have to get us out of here." "Captain, report your status," Admiral Vextar demanded. But the only response was the sound of grown soldiers crying like frightened children. Landing Team Alpha found themselves trapped in a shopping mall where the mannequins in the store windows turned to watch them as they passed. The plastic faces never moved when the soldiers were looking directly at them, but they always seemed to be staring when glimpsed from the corner of their eyes. "This isn't natural," whispered Sergeant Deckville into his radio. "The humans did something to this place. It's like the whole city is alive and it's watching us." Dr. Song Moran, observing from Luna Base, smiled as she watched the alien soldiers stumble through spaces that existed in multiple dimensions at once. The fear response is exceeding all projections, she reported. Their training never prepared them for psychological warfare of this magnitude. Landing Team Gamma's leader was now sobbing as he described corridors that breathed like living things, and elevators that opened onto rooms full of darkness so complete it seemed solid. "Please, Admiral," he begged, "bring us home. This place, it's not a city anymore. It's something else. Something that knows we're here and doesn't want us to leave." Admiral Vexstar stared at his tactical display in growing horror. All of his landing teams were still alive according to their life signs, but their radio transmissions painted a picture of soldiers losing their minds in a city that had become a living nightmare. "How is this possible?" he whispered to Commander. "Thalax, no species should be able to manipulate reality itself." The final transmission came from Captain Zikmar, his voice barely recognizable through his panic. "Admiral, the humans aren't trying to kill us. They're teaching us what fear means. Real fear. The kind that lives in your bones forever." Then, the radio went silent, leaving Admiral Vexstar staring at a planet that had just demonstrated it was far more dangerous than any weapon he had ever seen. The great meeting hall in the fortress world of Kethmorin had never seen such panic. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak paced back and forth in front of massive holographic displays that showed the horrible truth of their situation. The most powerful leaders of the hegemony sat around the circular table, but none of them looked confident. "Anymore? 7 entire fleets have vanished," Fleet Marshal Gexra announced, her voice shaking despite her efforts to stay calm. "They didn't explode or get destroyed in battle. They just stopped talking to us. Their last messages showed readings that our scientists say are impossible." Chancellor Vorthak stopped pacing and stared at the star map floating above the table. Red warning lights blinked where their fleets used to be. "What do you mean by impossible readings?" Ships reported that space itself was bending around them, Gexra explained. Their instruments detected gravitational fields that couldn't exist, and some crews claimed they could see stars that were behind them appearing in front of their ships. On the other side of the galaxy, in Earth's secret command centers, Dr. Kim Gi-woo stood before her own wall of screens. But her displays showed something very different. Where the hegemony saw loss and confusion, she saw a carefully planned operation, unfolding exactly as designed. "Dr. Park, how's Operation Nightfall progressing?" she asked her colleague. Park Min-ho touched his holographic controls, and a three-dimensional map of space appeared in the air between them. Dozens of red dots marked hegemony worlds, and each one had a small symbol next to it. "We're actually moving faster than planned," he reported with satisfaction. "Our hunter ships have reached their target positions around every major hegemony planet. We've already started the first phase of psychological conditioning on 12 worlds." The hunter ships were unlike anything that had ever existed in the galaxy. They moved through space like living shadows, so black that they seemed to absorb light itself. Their hulls were made from materials that existed partially in normal space, and partially in dimensions that most species couldn't even perceive. Each hunter ship carried a crew of humans who had trained their entire lives for this moment. They called themselves cultural adjustment specialists, but their real job was much simpler and far more terrifying. They were experts at breaking the minds of entire civilizations. On the agricultural world of Nethquin, 6 billion aliens went to sleep under familiar stars and woke up to find their sky had changed. The constellations they had known since childhood were still there, but now there were new patterns among them, strange geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly, symbols that made viewers feel sick and afraid without understanding why. Dr. Choi Minji monitored the psychological effects from her control station. "The subliminal anxiety induction is working perfectly," she reported to the global network. "The population is experiencing baseline existential dread. They know something is wrong, but they can't figure out what it is." Lee Hoonwoo, now stationed aboard one of the hunter ships, deployed what his team called doubt seeds. These were microscopic devices that could influence the quantum fields around decision-making processes in alien brains. "The local government is starting to question their loyalty to the hegemony," he transmitted back to Earth. "They estimated will take 47 days to completely destabilize their political structure. But the most disturbing reports came from the industrial world of Victoris. Han Seojen's team had introduced something they called memory echoes, artificial experiences that felt more real than actual memories. The planet's entire population began having the same nightmare. About a dark world where terrible beings studied fear like other species studied mathematics. "They're not trying to conquer us," the planetary governor reported in his final transmission before his world went silent. "They're experimenting on us, like we're laboratory animals." Back in the Hegemony Council chamber, Chancellor Vorthak received report after report of worlds where normal life had simply stopped. Not because the populations were dead or rebellious, but because they had lost the will to continue their daily activities. Entire planets of beings who spent their days staring at skies that now held too many shadows. "What kind of creatures are these humans?" he whispered to his advisors. "They don't fight for territory or resources. They fight for the pleasure of teaching terror." Dr. Song Moran, coordinating the hunter fleets from Luna Base, watched as panic spread through hegemony space faster than their fastest ships could travel. "The cascade effect is working better than our computer models predicted," she reported to Earth Command. "Their own communication networks are spreading our psychological warfare for us." The genius of humanity's strategy was becoming clear. They weren't using traditional weapons or even superior technology. They were using the hegemony's own fear against them. Every panicked report, every desperate transmission, every world that went silent served to increase the terror of the worlds that were still in contact. As Chancellor Vorthak stared at his displays, showing the growing area of space where his empire was losing its mind, a new transmission reached every hegemony facility at the same time. It somehow bypassed all their security systems and appeared on every screen. Simultaneously, Dr. Kim Ji-woo's .com face looked out at them from across the galaxy. "Leaders of the Hegemony Confederation," she said in a pleasant professional voice, "we have completed our preliminary assessment of your civilization. We are now ready to discuss terms for your surrender." The ship called Mercy's Hope slowly approached Earth, flying a white flag that was supposed to mean peace. But Supreme Chancellor Vorthak knew that flags meant nothing to the humans. It had brought representatives from every hegemony world that was still able to communicate, and they all looked terrified. Approaching ships came a calm voice from Dr. Song Moran at Luna Base. "You can come closer to Earth, but if you change course from your planned route, we will give you immediate educational help." Everyone on the hegemony ship shuddered when they heard those words. They had all seen what humanity's educational help looked like. 17 worlds had experienced different levels of the human teaching program, and their populations had come out changed in ways that were impossible to explain. The diplomatic meeting was set to take place in a beautiful building built into the Swiss mountains on Earth. Dr. Kim Gi-woo waited there with her team, standing in a room that looked friendly and welcoming. But every detail had been carefully planned to make visitors feel nervous without knowing why. "Dr. Park," she said quietly, "are the sound frequencies set up correctly for their species?" Park Min-ho checked his instruments and nodded. "The sound waves in this room will make them feel anxious, but they won't realize we're doing it, Doctor. Choi's team has also changed the lighting to make them feel vulnerable and exposed." When the hegemony delegation walked into the room, Chancellor Vorthak immediately felt that something was wrong. The space around him felt uncomfortable, though he couldn't understand why. The room looked normal, and the humans seemed pleasant. Enough. Dr. Kim Ji-woo was a small woman with gentle eyes. Park Min-ho had a friendly smile, and Lee Hoon-woo looked young and honest. Chancellor Vorthak, Gi-woo said, speaking his language perfectly, "Please sit down. We have many important things to talk about." The Chancellor sat heavily in the chair offered to him. His hands shook as he tried to maintain his dignity. Round the table, his advisors looked like frightened children instead of the powerful leaders they used to be. We have come to ask for peace," Vorthak began, his voice trembling despite his efforts to sound strong. "The hegemony is willing to offer you anything you want if you will stop your activities in our space." Ji-woo tilted her head slightly, like a teacher listening to a confused student. Chancellor, I think you don't understand what's happening here. We are not looking for bribes or payments. We are creating a new way for the galaxy to work. Han. Seojin entered the room carrying what looked like a simple tablet computer. On its screen were status reports from all the affected hegemony worlds. The information was presented as boring numbers and charts, but what those numbers meant was absolutely horrifying. Entire populations living under carefully controlled psychological pressure. Your species, Giwu continued in her gentle voice, declared war on humanity's future when you threatened to destroy us. This was not a fight over territory or resources. You tried to end our existence completely. Do you understand the difference? We take back everything we said. Vorthak pleaded desperately. We will leave your solar system forever. We will give you money, technology, formal recognition as a sovereign species. You still don't get it, Park Min-ho interrupted softly. This isn't about independence or respect. It's about education. Dr. Song Moran's voice came through the communication system from Luna Base. Dr. Kim. The demonstration materials are ready to show them. The walls of the room suddenly became transparent, showing live video feeds from across hegemony space. They could see worlds where the populations went through their daily routines in perfect order, but their eyes held the distant look of people who had learned that somewhere. In the galaxy lived creatures that had spent centuries perfecting the art of mental control. We are not conquerors, Giwu explained, keeping her voice gentle and patient. We are teachers. And you, Chancellor, are going to help us teach our lessons to the rest of the galaxy. Not by forcing them, but by helping them understand. Lee Hoon-woo activated additional displays that showed just how prepared humanity had been for this moment. We have been getting ready for this meeting for 73 years, he said calmly. Every possible scenario, every threat you could. Make every way you might try to resist. We studied all of it and prepared responses. What do you want from us? Vorthak whispered. All his pride and authority gone? Cooperation, Juwu replied simply. You will work as our ambassadors to the species that haven't joined us yet. You will help us establish the New Order 1, where every species understands that attacking others leads to educational opportunities. The final horror came when Han Sejin showed them the full scope of humanity's preparation. His tablet displayed a map of local space with thousands of marked locations. We have already identified 1,847 potentially dangerous species within 1,000 light-years of Earth. The systems are already in place to begin teaching them, whenever we need to. Chancellor Vorthak stared at the numbers and realized the terrible truth. Humanity hadn't just prepared to defend themselves from the hegemony. They had prepared to control the entire galaxy. And now they were offering him the choice to help them willingly or become another example of what happened to those who refused their education. What do we need to do? He asked in a broken voice. Jiwoo smiled kindly. Just help us teach the galaxy how to behave. 23 months had passed since the aliens first came to Earth and everything had changed. The mighty Hegemony Confederation no longer existed. In its place was something called the Terran Educational Zone, and Supreme Chancellor Vorthak was no longer a ruler. His new title was Senior Student Administrator. He spent his days writing reports for his human teachers, standing in his office on the world of Kethmoran. Vorthak looked at the morning statistics from across what used to be his empire. The numbers were amazing in their own terrifying way. Crime had almost completely disappeared. Wars between worlds had stopped entirely. Production of food, goods, and services had increased by 300%. But there was a price for all this peace and prosperity. Every single person in the former hegemony lived with the quiet knowledge that they were being watched. Somewhere out there, humans were studying their behavior, measuring their thoughts, and deciding whether they needed more education. On Earth, Dr. Kim Ji-woo walked through the beautiful gardens of the Seoul Command Center. The facility had grown into a massive complex that now controlled humanity's influence across thousands of worlds. As she strolled past flowering trees and peaceful streams, her team gave her the daily briefing about their galactic empire. Dr. Park, how are things going with the Outer Rim worlds? She asked, stopping beside a fountain. The water flowed over stones that had been carved with special symbols. These symbols would make 47 different alien species feel calm. and cooperative without knowing why. Park Min-ho looked at his floating holographic display and smiled. The Valkyrian Empire has asked to join our educational programs voluntarily. They watched what happened to their neighbors and decided that cooperation would be better than experiencing our alternative teaching methods. This was how the new galaxy worked. Species that had once been proud and independent now begged to be included in humanity's sphere of influence. They had all heard the stories of what happened to civilizations that resisted human education. Dr. Choi Min-gi joined them in the garden, carrying her daily report about the psychological adjustment programs. "The new bioneural interface systems are working even better than we hoped," she announced. "We can now modify the mental patterns of entire populations while they sleep. This ensures they maintain optimal compliance with civilized behavior standards." The irony was not lost on any of them. By becoming the galaxy's greatest monsters, humanity had created an era of unprecedented peace. Lee Heen-woo now ran the Youth Integration Program, supervising facilities where young aliens from dozens of species learned alongside human children. The alien youngsters laughed and played normally, but their education included subtle conditioning that would ensure they never developed the violent impulses that had characterized their parent species. "The third generation shows complete integration," he reported during their morning meeting. "They demonstrate all the positive social behaviors of their species without any of the territorial or aggressive tendencies." Han Seojin managed the technical systems that kept this new order functioning smoothly. From his control center in the Amazon facility, he coordinated a network of monitoring stations, psychological adjustment devices, and behavioral guidance systems scattered across 3,000 worlds. Dr. Kim, he transmitted during their daily coordination call. "We're receiving requests from 17 more species for voluntary inclusion in our programs. The word continues to spread faster than we projected." Dr. Song Moran, now holding the rank of admiral in the Hunter Fleet, oversaw the sleek dark ships that moved through space like predatory shadows. Their presence alone was enough to maintain order. Every species in known space had heard stories of what happened to those who attracted humanity's educational attention. "Current patrol status: all quiet," she reported. "The Zenthkar tried some minor territorial aggression against the Plexani colonies, but a single Hunter-class vessel appearing in their system was enough to remind them of proper civilized behavior." In the diplomatic quarters of Luna Base, former Supreme Chancellor Vorthak prepared his daily broadcasts to the unconverted worlds. These were messages explaining the benefits of joining what humanity now called the Civilized Species Cooperative. His words carried the weight of personal experience. It was better to accept humanity's guidance willingly than to require more intensive instruction. The children were the most important part of the entire system. In schools across the Terran educational zone, young beings of hundreds of species learned together, played together, and grew up understanding that aggression was not merely wrong, it was pathetic. They learned to view their ancestors' warlike tendencies the way human children viewed ancient barbaric practices. Dr. Jiwoo paused in her garden walk, looking up at the evening sky, where the lights of orbital stations twinkled like friendly stars. Each station monitored, guided, and gently corrected the behavior of trillions of beings across the galaxy. "Sometimes I wonder," Park Min-ho said quietly, "if we've become the very thing we once sought to protect ourselves from." "No," Giwoo replied, watching a group of mixed-species children playing in the distance. Human, former hegemony, and a dozen other species, all laughing together in perfect harmony. "We became something far more effective. We became the thing that even the most dangerous predators checked for under their beds." The galaxy had peace. It was a peace built on the understanding that humanity had made itself into the ultimate evolutionary pressure, not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through the simple demonstration that they had spent centuries learning how to break any species' will to fight, while leaving them perfectly capable of everything else. In the end, they had not conquered the galaxy, they had educated it.